Okay, so recursive and explicit definitions from a graph and from a table is going to be the topic of this particular one. So remember that I told you in the very first video that your n is like your x, it's your input. Your a sub n is like your y, or your output. So when I'm looking at a table here, I'm going to think of these, I'm sorry, not a table. When I'm looking at a graph here, I'm going to think of these values as my n. Those are my term numbers. And these values, my outputs, are my a sub n's. They're the term values. So if I were listing out this sequence, my first term has a value of 1. My second term has a value of 1/2. My third term says is 1/4. My fourth term is 1/8. And then my next term is 1/16. So I know you guys tend to shut down when you see fractions. You think, oh, I can't do this. But remember, I told you if you can't figure it out just by looking, then you can use the calculator to figure out what's being multiplied to get from one term to the next. So all you would have to do is say 1/2. You can either just change that to 0.5 or put it in as a fraction and say 1/2 divided by 1, and I get 1/2. That means that my common ratio here is 1/2. If you want to check it, then do the next set of numbers. Put in 1/4 divided by 1/2, and it gives you 1/2 again. So I am multiplying by 1/2 each and every time, and I can continue to check that if I'm feeling uncertain. But that means then that my recursive definition is going to be a sub n. The recursive definition is a sub n equals 1/2 times a sub n minus 1. The explicit definition, for that I need my first term, which is 1. I need my common ratio, which I've decided is 1/2, and then I'm going to raise that to the n minus 1 power. All right, let's look at a table. Remember, x's are the same as n, y's are the same as a sub n, so these are my term numbers, these are my values. To figure out what's happening, I'm going to say 50 times what? Well, it's clearly going down, so to figure out exactly what the fraction is, I could do 10 divided by 50, and it will tell me that that common ratio is 1/5. 10 times 1/5, if you put it in the calculator, if you're unsure, 10 times 1/5 gives me 2. So that's telling me that that common ratio is working out well. And then I can check and make sure that 2 times 1/5 is also 0.4. And it is. So that means my common ratio this time is 1/5. So I'm going to write my recursive definition is going to be a sub n equals 1/5 times a sub n minus 1. All I'm doing is plugging in that r for my common ratio, and everything else is staying the same. The explicit, remember, is a tiny bit more complicated, but also more useful. I need that first term, so a sub n equals, my first term on this one is 50 times the common ratio is 1/5 raised to the n minus 1 power. Right, and that's it. I've got a couple for you all to try. I did put some you tries in this one, and then I'll see you back in a minute for some word problems. All right, bye.